'Cause like a winter tonight, I thought I would always have light. The quick flash that you gave to me, so dark I could barely see. Looking
From wherever you are around the world, welcome and thank you for joining us. Today we're going to be exploring the world of egg donors. That's right. What is this world? We're going to find out with Dr. Diane Tober. She is the assistant professor at University of California, San Francisco at the Institute of Health and Aging. Let's welcome Dr. Tober to the circle. Welcome, Dr. Tober.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
This is an interesting topic, egg donors. The more I explored it, the more I learned, the more I realized how little I knew about it. So I'm so glad you're on the show. But before we start off talking about that, you have an interesting title that I got to find out more about. What is a medical anthropologist?
Well, basically, medical anthropologists study health, beliefs, and practices around the world. So some of my earlier work took me to Iran to look at Afghan perceptions and use of family planning compared to Iranians. And now I'm working on people's perceptions and experiences surrounding egg donation. So I know people that have studied rituals in some tribal area in the Amazon, for example. So it could take you a variety of places and with a variety of very interesting topics.
Sounds like a very interesting job.
Oh, it's great.
So let's go get started here with the egg donors. How would you start this conversation off? And let's start off with maybe who is in the market for egg donors?
Well, primarily the people who are looking for donor eggs include infertile women, infertile couples, and gay couples that have no other way of creating a family other than to use an egg donor and a surrogate. Most of the infertile couples that have come to using donor egg, it obviously wasn't their first choice. Their first choice was to have a baby with their own with their own eggs. And so people that have gone through infertility have gone through enormous trauma before they finally reach the decision to use an egg donor.
And is there a market for egg donors?
Oh, it's a huge and growing market, and it's a global market as well. There's a lot of other countries in the world where egg donation is illegal or paid donation is illegal, or there's a lot of restrictions surrounding egg donation. For example, in Australia, you have to already have your own children. And what those laws do in other parts of the world is drive the market elsewhere. So for example, people from Australia will come to the United States, or they might go to India or Thailand. So there's a huge global market, and there's a lot of movement of donors around the world where it's legal.
I know we talked a little bit off camera before. What are these top shelf genes? What does that mean? I know it's a catchphrase in the world of the egg donors.
Well, there's a lot of people, when a person needs to use an egg donor, they've lost control of their own reproductive abilities. So there's a feeling of a loss of control. And so what I find in people who've come to using an egg donor is that they want to get that control back. And they think, well, if I can't use my own eggs, or if I have to pay for eggs, I might as well get the best quality eggs I possibly can from the perfect donor. And so they might look for things like high intelligence, or somebody who's really attractive. And when somebody's looking for an attractive donor, they want somebody who's like exceptionally attractive. You hear about Ivy League eggs. In one of my interviews for my film that I'm doing, the agency had told me that the highest paid donor that they had was paid $250,000 because she had a particular kind of phenotype and genotype that the couple really, really wanted, and they had the money to pay for it. Now, that's an extreme example. There's usually donors are paid much less than that. But there's often this drive to be able to select the kind of qualities you want to see in your child.
Well, this is kind of, you're entering the danger zone, I call it, is when I start thinking questions impromptu here. But it starts making me think about Himmler in the days of Hitler here, and eugenics. And I know we talked a little bit about that too. How does eugenics play in this role here?
Well, it's not in an extreme version, like, for example, the negative eugenics in which people are being killed to be taken out of the gene pool, but there is a slight bit of the so-called positive eugenics where people are choosing the traits that they want to continue forward. One of the donors I interviewed said it's kind of like Gattaca, and you're giving parts of your body to somebody else, and choosing the best traits to move forward and to have your children. So there is an element of that. I don't think it's in people's forefront of their mind, oh, I'm going to choose, I'm going to be eugenically oriented. But there is an element of that. And you do see race and class differences in terms of who has access to these technologies versus who doesn't, based upon, income. And it's a very expensive procedure. So there's a wide variation, or there's not a wide variation of people who can afford it.
Yeah, I mean, if I could mix eggs, it would be George Clooney and Bill Gates. So let's continue on here. Now, we talked a little bit about illegal activities in other countries. Are there egg donor scams going on?
There have been some. And it can be scamming the egg donor or scamming the infertile couple or the intended parents that are planning on purchasing eggs. One of the donors that I interviewed, she went to India to donate her eggs the first time, and her agency from South Africa had basically encouraged the donors to lie about their profiles. When the clinic saw that these donors didn't match the profiles that came with them, it turned out that the intended parents were thinking that they had gotten donors that had blonde hair when these girls had brown hair, for example. So there is some questionable practices going on. Another donor that I interviewed, the doctor she went to in Thailand was part of the international scandal with baby M, the child that was born of a Thai surrogate, or baby Gabby, I'm sorry. Child was born of a Thai surrogate, had Down syndrome. The Australian parents didn't want that child, but did want the twin that was healthy. That particular clinic had also been part of a large scandal with the Japanese businessman who had about 17 kids created from donor egg and surrogacy to be eventual workers in his business. And there's egg donors that do get scammed as well. And that's why it's so important to look for really reputable agencies if somebody is going to do this, and to really do research on it.
Wow, 17 kids.
Yeah. It's enough.
One's enough?
Yeah, 2 in 1, yeah.
Yeah. How many? You have children, I'm assuming?
Yeah.
I hear you. So that kind of leads me to the question of risks. I know we talked a little bit about that, and I made the little joke of the Jurassic Park quote. A lot of times we wonder if scientists keep thinking about whether they could do something instead of asking the question of whether they should be doing it. What are some of the risks in regards to egg donors?
Well, the risks are largely understudied. And so far, currently, a lot of the practices, the agencies and the clinics, they say the risks are minimal. But in fact, with the research that I've started, I've found a number of women, I'd say close to 30% of women, experiencing what's called ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. So that can be either mild, which is some bloating and some discomfort that goes away in a few days, or moderate, which could be bed rest for 2 weeks and ending up in the hospital with IV fluids, or severe, which could be life-threatening. So there's a wide range of ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome, and that comes from the drugs that are used to stimulate ovulation production. Another thing that is kind of curious but not substantiated yet is that there seems to be, I've interviewed some donors that have had cancers, very unusual cancers, around the age of 20, 25, within a couple of years following their egg donations. And I've also interviewed donors that have had severe endometriosis, because endometriosis is related to the hormones in the body. And a couple of these women have ended up infertile following egg donation because of endometriosis. Now, there's also, people say there's the benefit of feeling like you're helping somebody else bring a child into the world. Do those benefits outweigh the risks? The research hasn't really been done yet to say.
Hi, welcome to Adelante. This is Adelante Recovery, and my name is Yvette Kuglin, and I'm part of the staff.
Adelante Recovery Center has helped people in dual diagnosis for 5 years. We accept most PPO insurances and provide luxury accommodations and 24-hour support. To speak with an admissions counselor, call 1-888-242-4450.
A lot of time we don't even know what's wrong with us, and sometimes we need to get away to figure that out. So if you want to go for a little retreat out in Corona del Mar, which is a confidential location, we're here to help. So we're only a phone call away. Thank you.
There seems to be also some kind of psychological implication here. What I mean by that is, I know it was one of the questions I was going to ask you is what happens when a donor meets their child? I thought that was an intriguing question. What happens then?
Well, again, it's a case by case basis. Most of the donors that I've talked to that have met their children or a child born from their egg donations, they're very happy to have that connection. Most donors are very open to being known donors. A lot of the agencies try to keep a wall between the donors and the intended parents. But in fact, I've found that the donors that do know of the children born from their eggs and do know, have that opportunity to connect with them or see pictures of them and be involved, at least in that distance kind of contact, it's been beneficial to those donors for the most part. I think a lot of the donors that I've interviewed where they have been anonymous donors really are asking for having some sort of contact. And I think that it's very important for the child to know, A, how they were conceived, and B, to have some information on that donor, because that is their medical genetic information, and they have a right to not only know how they came into the world, but also, it's a loss of identity if they don't have that connection to their biological parent to some degree.
I'm smelling some kind of innate tendency here, too. Sounds like a little bit of an innate thing from the mom, especially. She wants to connect there.
Yeah.
It also seems from the child, too, especially when you say it benefits both.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing that's really problematic is this idea of the mother. Who's the mother? And I found in a lot of my interviews sort of a conflict, an internal conflict with some people. People say, that's not my child. The child is the child of the people who raise it, who nurture it, and who give it that love. I just gave a piece of my body, a piece of my DNA. But at the same time, they might say, oh, I have kids out there. I have children out there. So there's a lot of confusion and ambivalence about it is their child, but it's also my child, but I'm not connected to it. So it's kind of like making the familiar strange and the strange familiar to some degree, because this is a part of your body. This is your child. And yet you're being coached to be alienated from your own biological child. But at the same time, it's still a connection. So I'm finding those kinds of issues very interesting.
Yeah, that would be fascinating to explore more and see what the research shows on that.
Exactly, yeah.
And I know the world of egg donors right now is starting to become, I wouldn't say pop culture, but it's entering the world of technology, and it's also entering a little bit of a weird environment, which we discussed earlier before the show. We used to have Tupperware, then it's lingerie parties, but you're saying there's egg freezing parties?
Yeah. And since Facebook and Apple have recently started these egg freezing programs, where it benefits to women that are in the workplace. Now, this is distinct from egg donation. This is egg freezing. So a woman, say I'm 30 years old, I'm a little bit older than that now, but say I'm 30 years old, I just got a job at Apple, and I think, I want to really work hard for the next 5 to 10 years. Well, Apple and Facebook and some other companies are saying, okay, we'll give you this medical benefit to pay for freezing your eggs so you can give us your best work years and delay your childbearing until later. So say late 30s, early 40s. Now, there's really no knowledge as to whether this works well yet or not. We don't know the success rates. I think they're like right around 30%. And also, one concern is that down the road, there could be a lot of young women thinking they have an egg insurance policy and then finding out that in fact they don't. Or they might end up experiencing the complications medically that some of the egg donors have experienced as well. But yeah, there are egg freezing parties that have been emerging in San Francisco and New York, and I'm planning on going to one just to see what it's all about.
Can't wait to hear about that.
The pathologist in me, I just have to go.
I can't wait to hear about that one. Yeah. Unfortunately, it does sound like some serious implications if things do go wrong. That's not a fun discovery 10 years down the line.
Yeah, it's surgery and it's hormones that you're taking to do this. So, why not have kids when you have the energy to do it and when you're able? So, it raises definitely some issues surrounding women in the workplace.
Well, that's the key word. I think you mentioned it right there since we're both parents. Energy.
Yeah, exactly.
You'll need that. So we talked a little bit about the donor meets the child. Are there any other psychological challenges for the donors?
Well, I find a lot of women some women are very satisfied with their egg donations, and some are not, or some have mixed feelings. A young woman at the age of 20 isn't necessarily going to know how she feels about the children produced from her eggs when she reaches 30. So I see some transition in how people think about these children over time, their biological children over time. So somebody who's older and now has children of their own, maybe they still feel satisfied with their decision, but maybe they think differently about that child because they see their own child and they know what it means to be a parent at that point. When you have young women that are between 19 and 25, they really haven't had that experience yet, so it's hard to really connect to it. So I think that is one of the issues, is that you don't know how you're going to feel long term. And you know, people are entering into these decisions and not necessarily having all the information. So some people, like I said, that I've interviewed would do it again, and some people would not, and they really regret the choices that they've made. So it's a case-by-case basis, but there is definitely some things to deal with psychologically and emotionally.
Now, we talked a little bit before the show as well. What can egg donors do? And I know you have some good advice for everybody out there.
Yeah, there's a group out there called We Are Egg Donors, which is a self-advocacy group for egg donors. And it's actually been a very interesting community because women are coming together and sharing their experiences. And what I've seen, it was started by 3 former egg donors themselves who really wanted to connect with other people, other donors, and see what other people were experiencing. And just like I've said, some of them are having positive experiences and some of them are not. A lot of that depends on the agency and the clinic that you go to. There's differences in the legal contracts. For example, some agencies require that you use their attorney. Some agencies allow you to have your own attorney. There's differences in terms of are the egg donations reported to the IRS, and do you need to pay taxes on them? Some agencies report it to the IRS with a 1099, some don't. So the best thing for women considering egg donation to do, if it's something they really want to do, is to connect with this group and then learn how to self-advocate and learn how to really do your research to make sure that you're going to high quality, very professional and ethical, more ethical agencies than others. It could mean the difference between having less than 20 eggs retrieved and having upwards of 80 eggs retrieved. You know, there's a wide range of numbers of eggs retrieved in clinical practices, how much medication you're given. You know, it's just so important if people are going to consider doing this, that they do it in a place that has their best interests as well as the intended parents.
I think it's great advice. This has been a very interesting topic. I hope the audience learned a lot from it. If they want to get a hold of you, which I know they will, where do we go to find more information about you?
Well, I can be reached through my email at diane.tober@ucsf.edu. And I also have my film website called perfectdonormovie.com. That's perfectdonormovie.com. And I have my own professional website, dianetober.com. So they can reach me through any of those avenues.
And the Perfect Donor movie actually explains how to be a better donor or a good donor?
No, it doesn't explain how to be a good donor. It's about who is the perfect donor in terms of people's perceptions. And it's taking the stories of the egg donors that I've talked to and really exploring their stories, their motivations, their experiences, and then coming, and following them throughout the film and bringing in interviews with the agencies and the clinics. So looking at how egg donors feel about their decisions and looking at what motivated them to do that and what the outcome is. So it's it's going to be a movie about primarily focusing on egg donors.
Sounds great to me. Thank you so much, Dr. Tober, again for being on The Circle. So if anybody's interested in this topic out there who's watched the show, now you know where you can get more information. I highly recommend this. She also has a wonderful blog that you can learn a lot more about egg donors and what they're doing, some of the hardships, some of the challenges, and some of the successes. Once again, thank you, Dr. Tober. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Remember, our motto is simple. Wherever there's psychology involved, even in the world of egg donors, we're there. See you next time, everyone.